about things.
Well, you're also very capable at sharing a lot of things. So today we're going to be talking a lot about some of the challenges that are very apparent in today's society, especially those
About
that are
things.
confronting a lot of our youth, and specifically to addiction, to mental health, and a lot of those challenges that come from an age where social media has become so prevalent and really kind of cut us off from human interactions and caused some significant challenges. So, if you'd like to start off by just kind of sharing your history and a lot of your experience that you've had.
Whoa. I'll try to be very, very brief with this. I too was a young man at some point, although this is hard to understand, but that's certainly true. I can clearly remember it. And life was not easy for me as I was growing up, but our great God is always with me. Even though I didn't understand him, he's always been with me and helped me along the way to overcome my bad choices and things of that nature, as many people have choices that they wish they hadn't made. And he led me along to always love learning and to basically feel good about life and to want to learn about life. And that's been very important. And so as I've come along, I've had many opportunities to learn many things. And I of course have been in formal education a lot, but uh, probably the most things are things I've learned spiritually as I've tried to help and understand people and tried to teach them. Those are the most important things that have happened in my life that have helped me to be a blessing to others. And so I'm really very grateful to be able to be here and to share some of the things I know. And it's a delight listening to these young ones, to hear their good voices and to feel of their joy.
All right. Well, again, we're grateful to be here today. So, just kind of starting right off the bat, one of the great challenges that we face in today's society is addiction. And addiction doesn't necessarily have to be something that relates to drugs or alcohol. It can be a habit that has become problematic and keeps us from being able to accomplish other tasks in our lives. Frequently, it can take the form of shopping or eating or pornography. So, just kind of give us an idea of how addictions occur, what takes place inside of us, and kind of what are the consequences of remaining in that addiction.
Okay. There's a great deal I know about this. One, because I've helped people get over their addictions, and I've taught about these things for decades of time, for nearly 35 years. And to try to say it very simply, I'll do my best with that. There's a lot to the story. Am I able to share a screen? I will show some things that I've identified that are common areas of addiction. Am I able to do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll go to share screen and pick. All right, all right, here. So I'm sharing this. These are, there's substances that people come addicted to, and that's when we think about drugs and, tobacco and other things like that. And so those are in here, but there are also things that we call behaviors or processes that people become addicted to. And in my time of teaching young adults and others, I've found that some people are addicted to cleaning their house. And this blue part here I have on the screen is really what defines it. The main thing that identifies something as addictive is that it is in control of the person rather than the person being in control of it. And I think that's really vital to remember. As I've thought about it and observed people, I found that in their lifetime, probably most adults will have some sort of something that they encounter, and probably not without realizing it, they encounter that's an addiction problem. Myself, I will mention that I was addicted to mint chocolate chip ice cream, which unfortunately, and I'll tell you perhaps why this was, but when I would eat a container, a large container, about a half gallon of mint chocolate chip, I would eat it all instead of just having a bowl. I'd have one bowl, and then I felt I had to have another bowl, and then I'd have another bowl, and then I'd have another bowl until I finished the whole thing. And then, as people do when they're paying attention, I felt ashamed of myself, and I hid the container so nobody would know. And the next day I rushed out and bought a new container of it. Now I'm not guilty. I didn't do anything. But eating that mint chocolate chip ice cream was in control of me. I was not in control of it. It tasted good, but I felt a lot of negative things because I was doing an addictive behavior. And you see all these things. Some of them are good things, like relationships and work and reading. I met a young woman who read probably 20 books a week, but she didn't do the other parts of her life because she was addicted to reading. She neglected many important things for doing that sort of thing. Shopping is not bad, but a lot of people, and maybe more women and girls than men, I think I've observed that, they may go shopping when they know they shouldn't go spend money so that they feel better. And that's why we do addictive things, is we're trying to feel better. And it could be any of these things. And some of these, of course, are exceedingly destructive, some of them less so. But all of them, when they're in control of us, that's an addiction, and that creates many problems in our lives. Sometimes smaller problems, in some cases, totally life-destroying problems. There's a lot of young people who do these things down here, in this, in video games, and maybe even TV, movies and video and those kind of things. And you don't think that's such a bad thing, but how much time are you spending with that? And can you stop, really, if you try? And I think if young people, and I myself, I think at times when video games first came out a long time ago, I had that for my son. I got a video game, and when I tried it, I ended up spending about 6 hours doing it because I couldn't let go of it. It was an addictive sort of behavior for me. I realized, holy, wow, that's really not good. I'm spending my time playing Mario Brothers, but it was fun. But I didn't do my life. I didn't do the more important things in life, and that's really what addictions are involved in. They're destructive, and we often don't realize how that is. Let me show you another screen. Let's see if I can stop this one and do the other one. Okay, share screen. Okay. There's really much more to this diagram, but this is, if anyone knows what a slinky is, Mr. Martin, President Martin, does anyone know what a slinky is? This is just a cross of a slinky. So that's really, it's not just a circle, it's something that goes down in a spiral. And that's really how addictions work. And it's called, in this case, the addictive behavior cycle. And we make choices. And these are the choices we make. And here are the consequences of those choices here and here. And so, this is very simplified, and there's much more to the story that we can and should learn, because most people have some kind of issue with this in their life. And often it's not very destructive, but think about how many people smoke tobacco and can't give it up. It's hurting them because it's not good for their body. There's a lot of people who spend a lot of time watching television instead of doing something productive. I've done that before too. I've been addicted to movies and television. So I really am acquainted with it. So when we make choices, we have consequences. All right, so over here is a choice of something on that list of addictive things. So when we make that kind of choice, and so let me say this, and I hope I'm clear with this, and you can help me know if I'm not. Our great God has made laws that operate everything about a human being, that's us, operates according to law. If we eat proper nutrition, then our biology works well. If we spend our time being kind to each other, we're happier, and so forth and so forth. And so these are just natural laws that are involved in these addictive things. When we choose to do something over and over, it becomes a habit, and we do it automatically. So if I eat too much, what happens to me? Well, I put on a lot of extra weight and things, and that's harder on my body. And, and actually doing an addictive disorder. If I eat too much food, if I eat the wrong kind of food, those things are harming me and stuff. But I may love Cheetos, which I do, and I don't eat those that much because the Cheetos are in control of me sometimes, and I eat the whole bag of the things because I really love the taste of it. Oh, well, I've got problems. All right. So when we choose this and we choose it again and again, it makes it automatic so that when we feel bad, we turn to it for comfort. And I found myself doing that in my life when I felt bad for some reason, emotionally bad inside for whatever reason, then I would turn to food to comfort myself. And that was the mint chocolate chip ice cream. That would be the Cheetos or anything that I like to eat. I would eat too much of because I needed comfort. The trouble is when we do any of those things, this is what happens to us. We lose feeling good about ourselves and we increase in fear. And these are unconscious things, but they're emotional pain. And it's a natural consequence of these kind of choices. So when we make these choices, we always will get something here of a negative form. And guess what? When we feel this way about ourselves and we've made these kind of choices, then we try to hide it. And so this is a choice over here too. We try to hide it. So what did I do? I emptied the mint chocolate chip and then I hid the container in the trash underneath some other trash. So I wouldn't have to face up to my sweetheart and tell her, yep, I ate the whole thing and I know I shouldn't, but I did anyway, and I'm weak, I'm sorry. I didn't want to do that, so I hid the container. Well, that's being dishonest. And I may tell myself such things as, oh, it's really okay, you're going to get another one and no harm, I didn't hurt anybody. But you know what? Eating a half a gallon of ice cream in about 30 minutes is really not a good idea. Just saying. Just saying, not really a good idea. So we lie to ourselves or we're dishonest with ourselves. I was being dishonest with my sweetheart, and of course, my relationship with our great God is harmed when I'm not being honest, not being honest. So when we choose dishonesty, this is what happens. We separate ourselves from ourselves even. We separate ourselves from others that we need to be connected to and love and caring and help. And so we form that. We form something that's called loneliness, unconscious emotional pain, and it's a natural consequence. When we feel that way, it's easy for us to seek comfort by doing the thing we shouldn't be doing. So that's why it's a cycle. And the thing that keeps it in place in part is we may not have built our spiritual moral foundation, which is, of course, what we're helping you to do and what the people who are helping you, they're helping you to build your good, strong spiritual moral foundation. And that helps protect us from these things. Our great God has provided true spiritual moral foundations for us to help us not have this problem.
So, Dr. Nowell, to interject real quick, as it relates to this idea of keeping secrets because we're ashamed, and this obvious separation that takes place in personal relationships that oftentimes we think are important to us, but this is just so completely against how we feel about these relationships. Like, what does it take for somebody to not keep a secret anymore?
So there's an opposite here. Ultimately, here's some of the problem. We don't know we're doing this. When someone has a problem with this, they don't realize they're doing this and that it's reducing them every time they go around it. They become weaker, less able, less productive, less happy, less successful, a little bit at a time, again and again and again and again. Some people destroy their whole lives because they go so far down this pathway. We don't have to, but we do. It's like a slinky. We keep going down and down and down every time around.
And
So part of what needs to happen is we need to realize this is what we're doing. That's the beginning of that sort of thing. It's being aware of, oh, I didn't realize that's what I was doing, because we don't think about it. We just do it. So when we realize it, now we have a hard choice, because if we have a habit of dishonesty, it's easy to be dishonest.
Mhm.
If we have a habit of indulging in things that aren't really good for us, it's easy to do that, to get comfort. So what we have to begin to do is make choices that are the opposite of this. So we make choices of honesty. And it's hard at first because our habit is dishonesty. It's hard to not self-indulge ourselves at first because that's our habit, but we choose now to serve others. And so there's an opposite of this cycle that actually builds us up and we go upward. And it's the opposite. The consequences are opposite of these things, but the choices are hard at first, and we need others to help us keep making these choices to change these habits. As that's how habits are formed, is from choices that now become automatic. At first, if we ever learned to ride a bicycle, we had to practice. We weren't good at it. At least I wasn't. I fell down a lot with that sort of thing, riding a bicycle. But as I practiced it, I could do it automatically, and I enjoyed it. And when we practice wrong things, they become natural to us and they happen automatically. But it's a habit, and a habit can be changed by choosing the opposite thing. Does that make sense?
It does. And to your point about it, taking time, like we didn't get to where we were overnight. And so,
Mm-mm.
as a parent or a leader or a friend, the expectation is this is going to take some time.
It does. It does, and it will. And there's really, for anyone interested in it, I have a list of, and it's pretty simple to understand, a list of rules, if you will, to follow that are understandable to to work your way out of this, because it's lawful. And there's certain things that help you get out of these kind of messes that you get into or realize you're in them, and learn to recognize those things. But there's a relatively simple set of rules that I'm happy to share anywhere, and it's, have it in print form.
Outstanding. And, again, as it relates to being a parent or a leader or a friend, um, we've identified what takes place in the person, but how do we help somebody who is going through this? Like, what do we look for as far as support or love, or what does that look like?
Yes, and so one of the rules is we need the help of a caring, at least one other caring person that we can be honest with, because it is practicing honesty is one of our things that is hard for us to do because we have habits of dishonesty, and we need someone who cares about us, so that, because we'll still make some bad choices on the way to changing here. We do some indulgence in our thing that we shouldn't be doing, and we'll be dishonest about things. We need someone who cares about us, who keeps caring about us, even though we still have those habits. But however, that we communicate with them regularly because we want to, and they love us, they care about us, and they help encourage us to identify and choose to keep taking the baby steps that we need to take to change our choices. And that's one of those things. It's a caring other person, and so, as leaders in organizations, we can be that in our family. We could be that for someone else in our family who has a problem. There's different ways. There's mentors, that we have in our lives. There are people who are willing to take time to help us, and those are the caring other people. Or it could be a professional person.
Good. And just one other thing as it relates to addiction. Um, so a lot of these are behavioral, but we also have chemical addictions
Of
to things
course.
like drugs, even tobacco, alcohol, things that are just really, really difficult. So just real briefly, kind of give us some of the differentiation between like a behavioral addiction versus a chemical addiction, and what are some of the unique challenges that come with those?
All right, so here's the list again. And so many of these are behavioral. If it's a substance, it's a chemical. If it's a substance here, and you can see some different substances, but other things are behavioral. And those are called process addictions in the profession. That's what they're called. Uh, and most of them are behavioral sorts of things that we choose to do that we get stuck in, and it's hard for us to change because it's in that cycle. Uh, All right, so let me go back to, let me stop this share and go back to the diagram, the other diagram. Okay, let's go share screen. So this one, it's important. This is part of the lawful relationship of things in us. So the top here is about thinking things, typically stuff we think is in our thinking and in our habits and this sort of stuff. And this section's about our behaviors, things we do and don't do. This circle represents what surrounds us, what's outside of our body. But our behaviors are the things we do or don't do. This is the thoughts and beliefs and other things, memories. And then we have our biology over here. That's our body and that kind of thing. And here's some spiritual and emotional sorts of things that are here. So now pose the question again.
So the question is we have our behavioral addictions, but then you throw in this component of a chemical addiction, and it adds some new challenges on top of the behavior that we're engaging in.
Yeah, so we don't, I mean, this is a focus for behavioral choices. This is a place we need to recognize what we're doing and emotionally as well as mentally accept that that's hurting us and other people. That's the challenge. But then we have all of that when we have a biological thing, because our body adapts to chemical things that we're doing to it. It adapts, and it is mean to us when we try to get rid of the thing that it got used to. And so that takes a lot of more care to get beyond those things and realize that any of these things we're doing serves a purpose for us. So the chemical things or, those biological things serve a purpose to help us either not feel as bad as we did or feel better for a little while. It's serving an important purpose for us because we're hurting inside in some way. We may be hurting physically in some way, and unless we get addicted thing, but we're trying to feel better with that sort of thing. But now our body adapts to it and needs it until it can learn to not need it. And that's a harder process. That's really a harder process when we have a substance thing, although the others are very hard themselves because it's very appealing and it's serving a purpose. It's helping us to feel better. So we need to learn to do that helps us to feel better, that's really good for us. And that's really quite a process, but doable. The good news is we can do it.
It is. And again, it just takes some time. So we need to be willing to be patient.
Yes. And seek and receive trustworthy help from people who can and will help us.
Yes. And I would just say from my experience in observing things like this throughout life is people generally already know that they're doing something wrong at that
Yes.
point. And there's this element of shame involved in it. There's guilt. And so if we berate them, if we yell at them, if we tell them they failed, like they already know, like in their mind, they already know that. So rather than helping them, we're just reinforcing this negative belief that they have.
And we're giving them more pain, which will make them want to do whatever they're doing wrong to comfort themselves more if we're hurting them that way emotionally. Sure.
Yeah. So, this idea of those who are acquainted with somebody who's going through this is just, we love them where they are. We don't accept that the behavior is okay, but we offer our love and support and help them get to where they need to be.
Right. Totally right.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Very informative. Before we move on to the next topic, anything else you'd like to add about addiction specifically?
Oh, well, I have so much to say, but so little time. And some of this, of course, doesn't maybe connect to people, because a lot of this we understand better as we come through life more. We can get to understand how these things are related. I want to say in this diagram that anything that you do and your thoughts and beliefs affects your behaviors, affects your biology, affects your emotions, and affects your environment. And each of these things, the reason for the two-way arrows here is everything affects everything else. Anything we do or don't do in any of these affects all the rest of it.
No, and I think that kind of ties in a little bit to the next thing, which is our ability to be resilient and deal with adversity and challenges that we go through in our life. Um, there's a lot going on in the world around us. We're hopefully at the tail end of COVID. Maybe some people have struggled with the emotional responses to disappointment, to loss of jobs, to family challenges, health challenges, crises, stuff like that. So, specific to this idea of resilience and dealing with adversity, what would you have to say about that?
Hmm. How much would I say about that, do you mean?
Or, we'll just see how it goes, and we'll roll with it for a little while.
So let me ask you, President Martin, are we to take questions at this point? Is that where we are in this discussion?
Certainly, we can certainly, if anyone has any questions at any time, I've got the chat up. And so, as it relates to addiction or any of these topics that we're discussing, please feel free to put them in. I'll push the pause button on Dr. Nowell and certainly ask any questions that you have regarding these topics.
Okay, I have a question
Okay.
concerning addiction. The processing for removing bad addiction, bad habits, and how long gonna take?
Okay, so tell me that again. I have a bit of a hearing problem and I need to hear you better.
The processing for removing bad habits, addiction, and how long gonna take?
It always depends on how long you've been doing it. It always depends on that sort of thing and how determined you are to learn what you need to learn and do the hard choosing of the right thing. It varies by person as to how long it would take. When we have had enough of our problem, and it's different for everybody. When I had enough of eating mint chocolate chip ice cream, and that's a problem. And in many ways, biologically, that's not a good idea. It was very tasty, but and it has some good elements in it, but it was in control of me. When I decided, oh, wait a minute, I just can't be doing that. And I learned that why I was doing it. See, I had to learn why I was doing it, that I was doing it to feel better. But, of course, it was just making me feel worse in some important ways. Once I realized that, it really didn't take too long to stop doing that. But it takes realization. I mean, how many people really realize that they're doing these kind of things? And so many people, I've talked to, let's just say for tobacco addictions, that's killing you, I would say. And they say, yeah, I know it. And they just keep puffing away on it, oh, okay, you don't really know it. You don't really know what it's doing to your body. So we have to really know it and appreciate that harm. And that varies with people. There's people, family members I've had that never got past doing that. Although any reasonable person knows it's not good for you, but they're addicted. And now it takes hard work to replace that, to learn about it, to learn to do the things that you want to do. But a lot of them, have lied to themselves. Remember the honesty about self. They lied to themselves. Well, okay, and I can't help myself. That they've accepted this personal lie to themselves, and therefore they can't make progress as long as they're being dishonest with themselves. Part of it is when you're ready to be honest with yourself, you're ready to recognize what you're really doing. Well, okay, then you can change. If you don't do that, you can't. And it could be quick, or it could be decades. You might have, typically, you could think of your own life, and I think of my life and others. Each of us has to suffer enough before we change. Something that needs changing. We have to suffer enough, and whatever enough is, it's different for different people. My daughter had to suffer very little and have a few years, and she was good. My son, not so much. It took him a lot more to change. He had to suffer a lot more. She had to suffer very little.
And so that terminology of, waiting for somebody to hit rock bottom is basically just stating like the consequence now has become so great that your choice is either lonely, like perpetual loneliness, complete unhappiness, maybe even death, versus I now know that I need to make a change in my life.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, as I tried to say with my daughter and son, I wish that he had enough of some things that he's doing that he shouldn't be doing, but he hasn't had enough of it yet, even though it hurts him. And he is blind, I think, to that it's hurting him. My daughter, took very little pain for her to say, wait a minute, I need to do different than that.
Yeah.
It's different. It's different with different people. We're different that way. And some people it's very quick. Other people, the rest of their life. I had a stepfather who had a alcohol addiction, and he was a liar, and he was a con man, and he never broke that. He never suffered enough to change that. He died, because his body was destroyed from alcohol addiction.
Yeah.
This is the personality of the person, of the character.
Yes. Yes, the personality of the person, and we each have a personality which we can change. We can make our personalities better. It's slow, but we can make her.
What about the environment, the family, the school,
see this circle? That's one of those factors. This represents our surroundings. So if we are able to put ourselves in a better environment around better people, that makes it easier for us to do right and to change and to progress.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all around us are invitations all the time to choose better.
Yeah.
But most of the time we're blind to a lot of those. We're deaf and we're blind to those invitations to do better because our great God provides those invitations.
Mm. Yeah.
Absolutely. We do have a question in the chat. The question is, what is a simple way to pick up bad behavior? And how do you know if you have good behavior?
Well, I think in our spiritual training, it's pretty clear what good behavior is and what bad behavior is. And if it's not clear, we need to do more of our spiritual training. Would you agree?
I would say yes. And I think sometimes those bad behaviors that lead to potential addictions come from very small things, spending time with maybe the wrong friends or being permissive and saying this once isn't going to hurt me.
Yes, here's how it happens. It's, if anyone knows what a thread of silk looks like, it's very tiny. It's like the thread of a spider web. It's very tiny. It's almost not able to be seen. And so it's like when we make a little wrong choice, one of those threads gets tied on us. And we make another choice, then now we have two of those threads that are wound together. And we make another choice, and three of those threads get together. And after a while, there's a rope that's attached to us that binds us down. And that's how it happens. It happens just as, President Martin was saying, that it happens a little bit at a time. And then it becomes where we're bound down. It's not that we can't get out of that. It just gets a lot harder. It's better to stay aware of the choices you're making, to stay aware of how you're feeling about it, because we all know really when we choose the wrong thing. The first time that I did a major wrong thing, and it wasn't violence or anything like this, but as a child, I chose to do, I felt awful inside, but I did it anyway. Mm-hmm. We know we know when we feel bad, when we've chosen the wrong thing. I did it anyway because I wanted to. And I felt bad, but I did it anyway. But if I keep choosing that, what happens is that becomes dead in me. If I, keep going in those kind of directions of wrong choices, and anyone, if we decide to keep doing that because we thought it was a good idea, it deadens our feeling of knowing that that's wrong. But we get warned inside, because we all really know inside what is right and what is wrong. If we ignore it or we go against it, it gets duller and duller, and it's hard to tell.
And Darren Coleman said, so you're saying to start with the choice to be honest rather than focusing on the habit as far as recovery.
Yes, I mean, it is choosing to practice the thing that is the opposite of the wrong thing we're doing. And you do that more and more, a little step at a time, a silken thread at a time. And that destroys the other one. That destroys the bad one by continuing to make the best you can, those small steps of right choices, of honesty. And instead of self-indulging in something, giving service and kindness to others without expecting any kind of payment or reward. So real service is the opposite of self-indulgence.
Mhm.
So instead of focusing on self, focusing on the good, and we can do this in our family, we can do this among our school peers, we can do this in many places, in strangers as we're in the store and things like that. So we can want to be kind to people, and we just be kind and nice to them and friendly to them appropriately. And every time we do that, that eliminates that other thing, that need to self-indulge in something that hurts us.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more. Oh, so between bad and good behavior, the one that gets fed more will dehumanize us as a human being or help elevate us.
That's correct. Yeah, the animal that we feed gets better. The one that we starve gets weaker. That's true.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you for those questions. All right. Well, I think we can move on to the next topic, Doctor.
I see Muhammad raise his hand.
Oh, Mohammed, you have a question? Oh, I see it there. Yes.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you again, Mr. Martin. Thank you, Dr. Nowell, for coming out and to teach us again and remind us of the most critical topics that we experience nowadays. My thing is more like I'm trying to echo what you just said, and basically I agree about the honesty factor. This addiction, we've seen it time and time again, especially nowadays, is being exacerbated by technology, by the way of lives that we're leading right now. And so that brings me to one point, since this is basically, in a sense, an interfaith dialogue, plus we're trying to treat through it, some of these phenomenons that are affecting negatively our society. So don't you think, for instance, it's the spiritual emptiness has a lot to do with this?
Totally.
As we know that nature abhors void, and so because we have that spiritual void, if you will, that's what attracts the other stuff to come in. Because when we talk about addiction, I think of it, and that's me, and I'm just an average Joe. I think of addiction mostly is behavioral in nature. Because you'll talk to people that smoke and they'll tell you it's not so much the chemical part of it, it's not so much the nicotine. They'll be telling you it's the hand and mouth addiction. And that's why that craving, if you will, is not really satisfied just by the chemical. They want to feel you see them doing patches, but then that doesn't satisfy them as much. Although those patches have a good dose of nicotine in them, and it just doesn't work out. So it's not chemical in nature. It's mostly behavioral, if you will, and that comes from different patches. So I don't want to take up too much of your time here, but I want you to elaborate on this. And so don't try to, feel free to not tiptoe around the religious aspect of it, because we all have the same core values in here, and we're trying to attack it from that side.
Okay, and each of these diagrams is important to that, because our body does, and so tobacco is a good topic to cover. It does become dependent on it, and it hurts when we're not doing it. The body hurts when it's become used to some substance that we're taking in. It now hurts when we don't do it. So it's involved in the smoking, but you're quite right. it is emotional too. It's important. It's a habit that we're used to, and that we get into a whole set of things that kind of calm us down or help us to stop and think or whatever. There's a whole set of these things. All this stuff is involved. There are some things that often singular parts of the people focus on, like just the biology or just the emotions or just the environment or things like that. But everything here needs to be addressed. Everything here needs to be addressed. I mean, as you change your environment, as you change where you are and where you customarily do what you shouldn't be doing. In other words, when I was staying up late, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., while my wife and young son was asleep, and while I was in graduate school, and I was woofing down the mint chocolate chip ice cream, I needed to change that environment and get myself to bed instead of staying up late, because that was part of the problem. I did emotionally crave that. My body gets used to sugar. And our bodies do get used to sugar. If you ever want to learn that, then do without all sugar for 2 to 3 weeks and then taste some and see how bad it tastes, because our body does adapt to things that we do to it biologically, but all these things are involved. There is a fullness to the story, and they all affect each other, and it really strengthens these problems because it's living in several places, and this is where our power is up here. This is where our power is, but then we have to do something about changing our direction. This is the changing of our direction up here. And of course, as you said, and it's true, as we focus on our moral center, our spirituality, that where truth lives, as we build that helps us to make the right choices. And then that changes these other things. And yes, that center is totally valid from my point of view. Some people can say, well, yeah, I just want to be a good person. Well, okay, work on that. That's a positive core. Being a good person, you can work on it that way. Of course, I think it's a much greater advantage to work at it from a spiritual point of view, because it's all collected there. There's much more to it. There's a lot of practices that help us to be a good person.
And I would add to that, my experience has been that, like Dr. Nowell said in the beginning, all of these things fill a temporary void, right? We run to it when we feel like we don't have any control of the situation, or we're dealing with grief, or something has happened and we just need to feel positive, and it becomes our go-to. And as people of faith, like generally that space can be filled with something more permanent. And a lot of that has to do with the habits that we've created spiritually. What are we engaging in on a week-to-week basis? Are we attending our worship services? Do we have open and honest dialogue with our peers at wherever we're attending? What's our relationship like with our leaders? And to pretend that the spiritual aspect of our lives does not play a major portion of our behavior and how we live our lives, that would be a complete falsehood. And people who I've identified in my experience, they don't have that, they are far more likely to run to a temporary relief, to engage in behaviors that end up becoming somewhat self-destructive, and in the end kind of remove you from experiencing real happiness.
Yes, they often, striving to do the right thing, they think they can just change this and this without building this. So they may have some philosophy up here, or they may have some cognitive philosophy, and they work on these things, but if they're weak here, they fall right back into these problems because there's no foundation to stand on. Our spiritual truth that we know about, and we, that we are blessed by, and that we are strengthened in, and that we are improved in, that's the foundation. And if that's weak, then people may temporarily get out of here, but they fall back in because they have no foundation.
I got just one little question here, and and that's probably going to be it for this section. Is it safe to say that because this addiction is as old as the hills, as everybody else knows? Okay,
Yes.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, do you think the addiction hits harder the youth because of their frontal lobe or front cortex that has not been developed yet? So there is this that contributes to this brain's reward system, so to speak, more than the adults?
I would say that they're weaker because of lack of experience. Okay. In some ways, they're weaker because of it's easier for them to get stuck in something because their experience of that which is good and that which is bad is not broad enough to make a better choice. And they're not strong enough in standing up for what they know is right. They haven't had an experience standing up for what's right to be able to resist the pressure of their peers. You know, that's an advantage that adults have if they go that way. And there's plenty of adults that can't resist the pressure of their peers. And there's plenty of adults who do not have enough life experience to understand that choosing good is far better than choosing not good. They don't understand that, but it's the lack of experience and the lack of maturity strength, you know, which we get through our spiritual moral foundation. We get that maturity strength there and in other ways. And
So
experience.
do you think it's physiological as well?
Well, that's undeveloped as well. I couldn't really say that. I understand a lot about the frontal lobe. You know, I've studied that. It's not fully developed, you know, and you know the things to help you understand that if you want to go down that particular course is looking at and I would suggest the work of Jean Piaget, the developmental genius, and 40% of adults in the culture of the United States, you know, and there's a lot of variety in our cultures and things, but 40% of the adults don't arrive at the formal operational thinking stage. They're in the concrete operational thinking stage. So it's a lack of development in the cognitive and that's of course what young people have. They are not as developed in the way they formally think. And let me briefly say what that means. And, you know, and I'm sorry to have to speed through this sort of thing, but someone in the third stage, which is the concrete stage, they are present oriented and thing oriented. They don't learn much from the past, and it's hard for them to change the present based on how that's going to affect the future. And they're focused on things. That's called concrete operational thinking, and you know, Jean Piaget. But formal operational thinkers, which is a process, not an event. You do that as you gain experience and as you gain wisdom and things, as you gain maturity, you get better and better at that sort of thing. It is a consideration. What did I experience in the past? Okay, I better be more careful here. How's that going to affect my future? Oh yeah, I need to change what I'm doing here, so it changes what happens there. Plus, we think about the deeper things: love, beauty, truth, hope, you know, and the negative things of that. We're able to comprehend and interact and understand relationships a lot better when we're in the fourth. But 40% of adults aren't in the last stage as adults.
Yep.
And that explains a lot. And yes, and so I think that speaks to your question. Yes, undeveloped biology, cognition, those things, when we're younger, we don't hit formal operational thinking until probably on average 16, 17. You know, so we give driver's licenses to people who don't think good. You know, that's why there's so much accidents in that age group. And I was there. You know,
hence the high rate. Yep.
People can drink and marry when they don't think good. You know, it's really bad.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Question. Very good question.
Thank you. And let me ask about this too. And I think there may or may not be a relationship as it relates specifically to our youth, but some of our adults as well, about this ability to create a strong foundation, build positive relationships, And now we have this world of social media and cell phones and technology. And so you see people interacting with each other right next to each other, but they're doing it via text message or Instagram. Is this having a negative impact on people's ability to function at what we would consider a normal level?
Yes, it is destroying intimacy. Intimacy is really what honesty is. When we're honest with ourselves, we're being intimate with ourselves. When we're being appropriately honest, we're being appropriately intimate with, meaning this, and I'm using the word intimacy as we are mentally and emotionally connected and understanding of each other. Now that's a process, not an event. But yes, we need the state of not being lonely comes from real mental, emotional connectedness to each other. And we don't get that through social media. We don't and can't and never will. We get it from interacting with each other, helping each other, studying with each other, doing activities with each other, which adults who have families or friends know that because that's what you've done. You've become stronger and connected to people who are trustworthy, and that's where your strength comes in this way. It comes from that kind of thing, and social media is destroying that. I mean, the partaking of this and thinking that you're getting it done there's not ever going to happen.
And so, as it relates to mental health conditions, would you say that currently we're experiencing an increase because there are a lot of young people right now who are on medications? They're talking about being depressed, having severe anxieties, or is this something that we just kind of swept under the rug in the past?
No, I actually think it's worse. I really do. And I try to be a good observer of the culture more broadly, both in this nation and around the world. We are believing and promoting things that aren't true. And so those things are worse. So let me speak to depression.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is, I hope, relatively simple to understand. And depression is an epidemic. And depression of its various forms is when we have the power of this, but don't realize it, and that's part of the problem, is when we have given up. In other words, we've let go of our hope or hopes about things that are important to us. And how that happens is we believe something that isn't true relative to what our hopes are, and so we give them up. So, for instance, in college, a young woman I was dating broke up with me, and I felt depressed about that. I felt abandoned and depressed, and a wonderful person like me, why would she ever want to be without me? And I was sad. In other words, my hopes to enjoy this relationship were dashed because and I had a belief for a period of time, well, that's it, I guess I'm a loser, and I'm believing things that are false. I'm believing lies. And there are a lot of people believe, well, I'll never have a successful relationship, or I'll never be able to do a profession, or I'll never get out of this neighborhood, or when we have hopes of better, but we haven't gained experience of how to achieve the better. It's easy for false beliefs to be sold to us, and we believe them. And it's when we believe those lies, those falsehoods, that's when we give away our hope. And it's the giving away of our hope that is depression.
And so we seem to have a really big problem right now, especially with a lot of our young people. There are obviously a lot of trends going on in the world right now as it relates to gender identity and sexual orientation, and not just relating to them personally, but they seem to be taking on a lot of these feelings for their friends on their behalf as well.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing, just kind of like you said, this epidemic, this mushrooming cloud of just depression in our young people specifically.
Yes. I mean, And, you know, there's among groups of good young men and young women, there's a greater embracing of, I don't need to engage in proper marriage. You know, it's, you know, marriage is hard to do right. Anybody who's married knows that. It's hard to do right, but it's worth it to do right. And it's a learning process, it's a long learning process. I've been married for, you know, 50 years, over 50 years, and I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it, but much of the time I'm immensely happy because I have been able to learn the laws that govern it and why that brings such great happiness and why spiritually we've been encouraged to do that. But don't be it's the hardest thing ever to do right, but it's worth it. And a lot of our youth are abandoning that or postponing that, thinking, yeah, I can be happy and have fun, and that's all I need to do. I don't need to do that thing. And see, they're believing a lie. They're believing a lie. The lie is you don't need to do that. No, it's important that you do that. It has made me a better person because I've been willing to take the punches, you know, that reveal where I'm flawed. You know, I've been willing to take those mostly, you know, some I haven't yet, but yeah, because I've been willing to go through the process and learn and grow and try to be a better spouse and a better parent. It's made me a better person, but they're believing a lie. They don't need to do that stuff. They do it wrong. They're believing lies of doing that wrong. You know, we're taught the right way to do it, and less people are doing that.
Mhm. And so there's this strong component between addiction and depression about having a weak spiritual or moral foundation.
Yes.
This idea that we can somehow trade in what is old fashioned or
Yes.
traditional in an effort to try new things and think that we can do it better.
Yeah, that's the lie of, oh yeah, that's those old folks and they believe that nonsense, but we're going to be happy doing it the wrong way here that we believe is the right way. That's never going to happen. Never going to happen. You know, there's a wonderful thing that I focused on or that I've been guided to focus on, spiritually guided to focus on, and it's called the laws of happiness. And so I've identified over decades of time what really produces happiness. And it's, you know, I have a little 1-page bullet list of those things. And those are the things when we learn them and do them, that's what produces happiness. And, you know, you can believe it's something else, but it'll never work. You know, you can believe that, you know, having 42 blue cloth chairs is going to make you happy. It's not going to. It's not going to do it. You can believe that owning a pet tiger is going to make you happy, but that's, you know, it'd probably eat you, but you know, it's not going to make you happy. But being kind to others, being forgiving, learning to do meaningful, productive work, and the various other things on this list, you know, learning to play appropriately, learning to love others, and various other things. Yeah, when you do those things, guess what? It produces happiness. What a concept.
So we've got a question from Ibrahima, and thank you for the question. Do you believe we should return to the old education system where teachers and neighbors were all involved in the development of a child? As they say, it takes a village to raise a child.
It depends on what kind of teachers and neighbors you have. You know, it's not just neighbors and teachers. It's, you know, because sadly, there's a bunch of teachers who are teaching a bunch of nonsense now.
Mhm.
And sadly, there's a bunch of neighbors who are doing a bunch of nonsense now. But yes, we need to build and strengthen each other in our communities with people who are really on the right track. You know, from whatever place they're coming from in that, you know, if they're being good, honest, productive people, we need to build those kind of associations and support each other in that. Yes, that helps. The village helps if it's a good village. If it's a corrupt village, it'll make you corrupt faster.
Yeah. And as it relates to depression, so there's a small portion of this giant group that actually has what we would consider clinical depression.
Yes.
But you're saying the sheer quantity right now, a lot of that is due to people just making poor choices in their life and not being able to deal with the consequences?
It's false beliefs that they're embracing. All right, see, and I've talked with many people. I've taught thousands of students, and and I've considered this across thousands of people, if you will, which sounds really creepy, but that's how my life has been. But I certainly recognize, and so you remember, and I'll go back to it again here briefly, to the whole person diagram. So what I've learned is the vast amount of depression comes from wrong thoughts and beliefs. And of course, there's wrong behavioral choices and things like that. But here's what it is. When we believe that we have no hope and something's important to us, when we believe that, then we're depressed. When we believe that, we're depressed. Now, some little bit of it starts here. There are some flaws that start here, but that's very small percentage. There is some that starts here, but the vast amount of it I've found from experience is it starts here. And when and this is what therapy is about, really, effective therapy, it is helping the person change their wrong thoughts and beliefs. And when they do, guess what? They get past their depression. It may not be quick, but it's a matter of changing their wrong thoughts and beliefs. And it works. It really works. It's not like it's easy.
Mm.
In some cases, very hard for them to do that sort of thing, depending on their personality and what these other things have been here. It's only very little where it starts here. Now, sometimes it's so bad that you need the biology, the medications, to bring a person to a point to where they can actually begin to do this.
Mm-hmm.
When it's so severe, the clinical depression things, you can talk yourself blue to help them change their thoughts and beliefs, and they're not getting it because they can't deal with what you're saying. They're unable to until they get themselves tamped down enough to be able to begin to understand and do these changes that they need to do here, and the changes in their behaviors and changes in their environment and so forth. The recognizing that they can choose their emotions and where they come from. See, that kind of work, if this is going on too severe, they can't do it. And so so it's a good idea in a few cases to have medications, but the goal is to fix it in all these other places so that that's not needed.
So in a lot of regards, it's very similar to an addiction, wherein you've created kind of this mental trap for yourself, this habit of believing a certain way, and it is now dictating how you're choosing to live your life.
Yes. And people don't realize it because they're not self-aware. They don't look and see, what am I believing? It's not most people who do that. They don't assess themselves and say, wait a minute, how come I'm unhappy? And what am I thinking about? And is that really true? And what's my experience tell me? They're not self-aware. It's happening in their unconscious, which they could get to, but they don't realize to look there. They don't realize at all that here's where the source of the problem is, or here living where I'm living and who I'm associating with, the social thing, that's really beating me down.
Mm-hmm.
They're not self-aware of those kind of things, or they may be doing some things that they've chosen too much of the wrong thing. They don't realize that's what's beating them down.
Yeah. And so rather than taking accountability at this point, it's real easy for people to just say, I'm just depressed and that's the way I am. And it's easier to say that than to say, I'm an addict. Nobody wants to walk around and just say, hey, I'm an addict.
I just have anxiety. It's just the way I am. Or, hey, I get mad. I can't help it. That's just the way I am.
Mm-hmm.
None of those things are true. I mean, there's a lot to change, no question.
Yeah.
But none of that's true.
And I think it lends to a more important piece, and Muhammad talked about it earlier, is this idea that we're self-determining creations as humans, right? We have the ability at any given point to make a decision that will change our life for good or for bad. And when we choose to give that up because it's just the way I am, or things are acting upon me and I no longer have a choice. That is a choice to give up that right. Is that correct?
Yes, it's that's the fundamental false belief that I have no power to be better. And when we embrace that false belief, we've given away our power to be better. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It means that because of what we believe, that's what's crippling us.
Okay, so for all of these things, we each have a choice, right? And we need help. It would be foolhardy to think that we can do any of these things on our own. From a spiritual perspective, to believe that God can't help us to become better. Also, from a spiritual belief, to believe that we have leaders who can't help us. That's a false narrative. Hopefully, we have parents who are part of our life and choosing to be with us. Hopefully we choose to surround ourselves with friends who see us for who we are and not for our mistakes and not for our shortcomings. But we have a choice, and we need to make better choices, is I think kind of at the crux of all of this.
That is such a valuable gift that we've been given, is our ability to choose and to realize that there's much more. We have much more control of how we are. There was a historic person, I'm not going to particularly mention his name or circumstance, who was captured by his enemies and he and a bunch of his fellow citizens were captured by his enemies and were horribly treated. They were starved, they were beaten, they were tortured, and he saw the best and worst of humanity among his fellow citizens. Some of them gave up to last their food, knowing that they would die when they gave it up. Others of them would do every dirty thing to steal someone else's food. He saw the best and worst among his fellow citizens who he believed were basically good, but in the hardest times, that's when we reveal ourselves. And the great insight that he took away from this, and it was an insight from our great God, really, was that everything can be taken from you. Everything, your health, your possessions, your dignity, your physical ease, all of that can be taken from you, but the thing that can't be taken from you is what you will think about it and how you will choose to feel about it. And that is a massive insight, massive, massive, true insight.
Thank you very much.
Mohammed, I think you have a question.
Yes. I really appreciate, the talk. I just love it. My wife was listening in on your talk, and she says, "Yeah, he talks like Dr. Phil." I'm like,
oh no, I don't know if that's good or bad.
That's good. So now, there is. She's not with me now. She just tuned in for a couple minutes and she left. I'm in the car here by myself, but. What I like to see, it's not just, how to fix it. How about proactive approaches? Not too long ago, I heard the director of National Institute of Health. His name was something Dres Zarhoni, something like that. And he gave a good example what the, because this brings us a little bit to the mental health. And he says, if you break your leg, where do you go? You go to the doctor. How about if you break your spirit, where do you go? So a lot of people, I think it's because social pressure. A lot of people suffer from depression one way or the other. They suffer from addiction one way or the other, but they're afraid to speak up, because if you go and see a therapist, you're crazy. It's looked negatively upon. So I think the proactive approach is to actually change that. It doesn't matter. You have session with therapists, you have session with your life coach, whatever the case might be. At least you have somebody to help guide you through potential issues that might arise. Now, and I'm saying this again within the framework of, if somebody is religious, somebody's, I'm so sure mosques, synagogues, and churches, have entities where you can actually seek help. So I want to see more of proactive approaches, more than just fix it, more than the old adage saying, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It might be broken or might be potentially going to be broken, but you want to catch it at early stages rather than, you know, until it's really, I would say, not hard, but it's going to be difficult to deal with.
Yes,
So,
and this is why helping parents be better parents is so very important, because they can help from the beginning. Now, ultimately, each of us, especially as we grow into adulthood, which is a slippery concept,
yeah,
you know, we can resist everything our parents are doing. So parents can't guarantee the outcome, but helping parents know how to be better parents is very, 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 very important for the prevention of this sort of thing. And that's the sort of psychologist I am. I believe prevention, you know, and there's actually a cultural saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
that's correct.
Yes, prevention is so much less expensive in the terms of that. But people aren't preventing. They're not seeing that they need to prevent these things coming along. And you can, you know, you can
It's hard.
prevent.
Yeah, it's hard to prevent. You know, if you know, I have my son who just got bit by a dog last week, and you just can't prevent the event from happening. But
No.
there has to be some way to cope with that and to be proactive, you know, with that. And so that's why I was a little bit careful not to use the word prevent, just because you can't prevent things that can come in life, but you can only.
No, but by prevent, I mean that you strengthen and develop those people that you have the privilege of helping, as you help them strengthen and develop. And that's really what we're doing here, is we're helping each other understand more, know where to look, and do those things. And anytime as a human being that we are being effective in making and helping each other, not making, but helping each other be better, we're helping prevent problems in their life by helping them learn the true things that are the moral centers of things, the correct centers of what is true. You know, being nice to people is the right thing. Everybody knows that. They may not do it. But building things up instead of tearing them down is the right thing. And everybody really knows that, even though they don't do it. We know it. And it's the doing of those things and being dedicated to doing that as much as we can wherever we're placed in our life. That's the prevention thing. We can help people prevent problems by being fully engaged and active in helping them learn correct principles and encouraging and supporting them to living them.
Thank you again, Doc.
You bet.
I see a hand raised for Asim and Assad.
Asim, you have a question? Asim? Okay. There is Ibrahima. I think he wrote something on the chat.
All right. It says, is this an example of addiction or depression if you have someone who always cleans the house even when there is no need for it, and they have a higher priority than cleaning the house? They, on the other hand, are always eager to clean it.
Yes, that is almost certainly an addictive thing. And here's something that we do, that all of us do. You know, our ability to control things in our lives is important to all of us, and we're better or worse at that. And so when we're out of control, however that may be, we often will focus on something of lesser importance to gain some feeling of control. So, for instance, when I'm out of control, I might go to my office desk drawer and arrange my paper clips and make them neater. You know, that's not very productive, but it would give me some emotional sense of feeling of more control. And so, and here's another feature of that sort of thing. Some people have a much greater need for visual beauty, and there's nothing wrong with that. And, you know, my spouse is like that. She has a much greater need for physical beauty, me less less so, thus no hair, big ears, big nose, okay, I'm okay with that. But I would wear, clothes with little stains on them and things, but she can't stand that, and so she's very particular about making sure that I dress and that I shave and, do the other things that make me more visually appealing. And so that could be a factor for people too in the cleaning. We may enter our house and my wife said, "Oh, the house is a mess." I look around, I don't see any mess anywhere, but she does, because she has a greater need for visual order. I have a less need. Now, I like visual order, but that's not an emotional need for me. I can live in chaos. I create some of that chaos.
Oh man. So you mentioned something about this need that we have to feel like we're in control. Sometimes things happen to us in our lives where we kind of lose control for a little moment of what takes place in our life, and often referred to as a trauma. It could be to Muhammad's point about his son being bit by a dog or a car accident, or somebody wrongfully imposing their will on us,
Yes.
whether it be through some form of abuse or something like that. So if you could take just a few moments to kind of talk about the impact that that has, and I think it's still going to come back to this idea of choice.
Yeah. So, when I was, I'll speak to personal experience and other experiences as this kind of unfolds. But when I was a child, I was very thoughtful, but I had little to no control of an often difficult environment, a home environment, and so forth. And I was not. I came from a relatively poor family. There was, we had our sufficiency of food and that sort of thing, but I never had the clothing that the other kids in school had. That wasn't in rags or anything. It was, but it was plain. It wasn't cool. It was, it wasn't the latest fashion thing. I didn't have any of that. And I felt, I didn't have any ability to earn money as a young person to take care of that. And, you know, my parents and stepfathers that I had weren't reliable for that kind of thing. And so I was out of control. I really was out of control. And so, what we need to learn is what we really can control and what we can't. The healthy thing that we help each other with is, all right, so ultimately, how I choose to move forward in life is something I can control. But I need to believe that I can get somewhere from where I am. So I began to look forward to an age when I could work and earn some money and spend some money on some things I wanted. Doesn't mean I spend it wisely, but yes, okay. As I was becoming adult, I realized, okay, I can control some of this stuff, and I can make my choices and this sort of thing. It is such an important thing. The need for control is more important than our need for love, I have found. The importance and the need for control in our life is more important, and too many people go about it the wrong way. They try to control someone that they care about, or they try to control things that aren't really in their control. The thing that we can control is what we'll choose to do or what we'll choose not to do. We can decide to be in an environment when we have the power to be in it or not, or change that place where we are. We have power to do that. We have power to believe something or not believe something. We can believe something negative, or we can believe something positive. We have power over our emotions. We can choose to feel happy, we can choose to feel hopeful, or we can choose to not do that. We have control over those things. And as we gain experience, as we explore our world and we exercise our choices and get the consequences and things, we can learn where we can exercise our control and where we can't. A lot of people, even into later adulthood, are still trying to control other people. And that's not in our privilege, really. It's not in our privilege. Now we do that as parents. We have high control over our infants, but it's a transfer of control to them. The gift of choice, the gift of control is a gift to us. to make choices and to experience consequences is how we learn. It's how we develop. It is essential to getting better. Now, we can choose to get worse or we can choose to get better, but we need to know that about ourselves. We need to experience that ourselves. So choice and control are very essential. I'm not quite sure I got fully where you wanted me to go, but straighten me out.
No, I think you went to the right place. And I think obviously we've had a couple of things that have just flown through this whole thing is choice is important. And we need to stop blaming other people. We need to stop blaming our circumstances, and we need to accept that we are accountable for our life's actions, and that if change needs to take place, it starts with me. And another thing is, I think sometimes we have this expectation, and again, this day and age of having a cell phone in my hand where I can Google an answer immediately, is we think that these answers, these changes are going to be immediate. And so this idea of it takes time to change, and it requires hard work and patience and resilience, but that it can be done. I think those are kind of the things that have just kind of been threaded through this whole thing. So I think where you went with that was exactly true. And it doesn't do us any good to focus on the traumas because it happened. It is what it is.
Yes.
So what am I going to do now to be better tomorrow and the next day and next year? What can I do today to make that better?
We need to gain the confidence that we can and will find our way. If you embrace that belief, you will find your way. If you embrace the belief that I'm never going to find my way, it's true, you won't.
No,
So it's embracing, it's emotionally, not just mentally, but emotionally embracing. Yeah, and that's what I embraced as a child. And that's what I embraced, coming along. Well, okay, let me just go see if I can take care of it. Let me see what I can do about myself. And, and I was a lazy slacker student all through my undergraduate bachelor's degree. And sadly, I cheated to make grades. I wish I hadn't, but yeah, I did because I thought that was a good idea. That was pretty stupid. And as I developed my moral foundation, I realized that was really a dumb idea and really a poor learning experience. And, so as I came along, I had little glimmers of the better way to go. And as I followed those glimmers, I got better and I advanced in life, and the benefits of life accrued to me. But it's a process, and we have to want it. We have to believe that it's there for us. And that's what our moral foundation, our spiritual foundation gives us. It is there for us. We can improve. We need to improve. You just look around. Yeah, we clearly need to improve, and we can. We can, and we have the power to do it. It's never quick, just as President Martin said. It isn't quick, and in some ways, that's a really good idea. It needs to be slow. Imagine if you have your best friend and you get along really well with them, and then tomorrow they're your enemy. What if we could change that quick? That'd be awful. Your life would be a chaos, but we change slowly, and we can become better slowly, and we can become worse slowly. We have the power to do that.
I've certainly learned a lot today and grateful for it. Just kind of before we close, let's assume our baseline is we have a family, some parents who are really trying hard, they're doing their best, and they have some concerns about how they can help their children. What are 2 or 3 things, generally speaking, the parents can do to kind of help their children develop some of this resiliency and really feel like they're setting their children up for success?
The first thing that comes to my mind is this, and I, as a young person, I have very strong emotions, and as a younger person, it was very easy for me to be angry. Very easy to be angry, and I got very good at being angry. Bad idea, but I got very good at it because of strong emotions and things. And then over a course of several decades of my life, I learned spiritually what I was doing wrong, and I learned about that, and especially as I was trying to help other people to reduce and eliminate their anger, which I was engaged in doing and still am. Here's the insight. Where where we go wrong fundamentally, and this is what parents and each of us. All right, so there's three things. All right, so let me do two of them, and we don't have much time to talk about them, but one of them is ignorance. Thing that's wrong in every relationship is ignorance. We don't know what the other person, the other city, the other county, the other state, the other nation, we don't know what they really expect of us or want from us. That's an ignorance thing. Nor, and often, we don't know what effect the way we currently are is having on them. That's a matter of not knowing what's really important to know. That's ignorance. The other thing is selfishness. We may know what effect we're having, but we don't care. We don't mind hurting them or something like that. That's a selfishness. So in relationship problems, always, selfishness and ignorance is always the problem. Always, always, always. All right. The other thing is this, is that we have typically across the board in different ways, we have a false expectation of each other. And sometimes this is according to what age the person is, or it's based on what I can do, you should be able to do. We have false expectations, but here's the thing about it. How a person is currently doing is the best they can do, or how they're not doing is currently how the best they can do. We may expect them to be better at something or to not do some things, but if they're doing it, that's a manifestation of that's the best they can do right now at their level of development and given the pressures of their life. It doesn't mean they should stay there, but it is our false expectations of each other that stand in the way of us helping each other better. Does that make sense?
It does. So this idea that, as a parent, like we have this feeling like we want to control everything our child does, but there has to be some level of understanding of our child and their thought process and their feelings. And there has to be some level of autonomy to let them make a decision, even if it's the wrong one, but we're there to correct them.
Yes, it's controlled transfer of choice from us to them. So we design scenarios. So for instance, early, something we did right as parents is in beginning wise, we put out different clothing choices for our young children, say, okay, which one of those do you want to choose today to wear? But it was controlled, it was limited. Later in their life, all right, you've earned some money and you want some help from us to buy certain type of clothing that we know is going to wear out in 4 weeks. You want to choose that? Okay, we're saying to you, you'll be sorry because you're going to use up all your money, but it's your choice.
Yeah.
And then helping them to see, so how'd that turn out for you? Without rancor or whatever. And so in our case, our son wanted to dye his hair blue. And essentially it was a bad crowd at school that did that sort of thing. We said, son, don't do it. This is what's going to happen to you. And you're really, really not going to like it. And there you're going to be with blue hair. Mm-hmm. He said, no, it'll be good. I'll be fine. Okay. And he was old enough to make, so we let him dye his hair blue, and he went to school and had some devastating social interactions with people who wanted him to now associate with them, and it terrified him. And he came home and he washed his hair. It was a temporary dye 20 times. It still was a faint blue, but he was terrified. But yeah, it is a controlled transfer of control. It is a planned and careful transfer of control and consequence.
Well, and I think you didn't necessarily exactly mention it, but I think it's implied with this idea of ignorance and selfishness is we too need to learn to listen to our children.
Yes.
We need to treat them as future adults, as people who are going to make decisions, and we need to hear them, because I can impose my will as a parent on the child and they may become resentful. They may choose a completely different path because what I'm maybe living is not consistent with how I'm presenting at home. But to be present in their lives, to listen to them, to be slow to anger, and really help them feel like they're a person of value.
Yes. Yes, that's certainly true. Another thing that spiritually I've been helped to understand as I've come along and experientially is a little set of rules that I call fair fighting. It is how to successfully talk about sensitive issues with someone you care about. And it's a good rule set, you know, and the probably the most important thing is learning how to listen to them.
Yeah.
That's probably the hardest thing for us to do because we want to be understood. We don't want to take time to understand. We want them to understand us because it's all about us, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
And so learning to listen both with your heart and your mind fully is quite a learning task, but exceedingly important. And that's for any age and any relationship.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I've learned quite a bit today, and it's been a blessing to be able to learn from you, Dr. Nowell. And I
Sure.
hope everybody else has had a positive experience. Dr. Abdelgawad, I don't know if you have anything left to
Yes.
say.
At the end, really, I want to appreciate you all for being here, and it was very beneficial session. Thank you so much, Dr. Brain, for your time being here. Support our program, Tanween program. Thank you so much, Mr. Martin, for being here, your time, support, Tanween program. Thank you all for being here. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a privilege.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.